Welcome to Running on Reddit. r/AskReddit. Doctors of Reddit, what's the biggest case of faking it you've ever seen? Taking trauma call during surgery residency. Had a prisoner come in after a fight and claimed he couldn't move or feel his legs. All the CT scans and MRIs were normal, but we would shield his legs so he couldn't see them and poke them with needles and other sharp objects with enough force to cause pain. He never flinched or moved his legs at all. He was diagnosed with SIWORA, spinal cord injury without radiographic abnormality. He stayed in the hospital for a week, no improvement. Always had one guard with him. One night, they were down in the lobby watching some television, but the guard needed to use the restroom. The patient said, "Where could I possibly go? I'm paralyzed." Guard left him alone for 2 minutes. Patient last seen sprinting down the road, naked butt cheeks flapping in the breeze. Made it to a city 4 hours away by car, before he was caught again. I have never seen anyone fake it so well. Truly playing the long con. Dermatologist here. Patient was convinced she had a melanoma and needed a biopsy and would need to be on workers' comp. I told her it looked like ink from a marker. She demanded a biopsy. I wiped the area off with an alcohol swab and showed her the ink and that there was no spot on her skin anymore. She stormed out threatening to sue. I'm just glad I cured her melanoma. I'm just glad I cured her melanoma. But, she didn't want to be cured. You charlatan. Real life miracle worker here. Not a doctor, but worked in healthcare for nearly 20 years. While taking a break from the ICU, due to it being emotionally draining, I worked in home health for a bit. I had a patient who clearly had Munchausen syndrome. On a daily basis she would call her insurance to see what things would be covered if she was diagnosed with this or that. She called her doctor's office an average of 5 times during my shift with her. She would report all kinds of non-real symptoms. She pestered the doctors into do exploitive laparoscopic surgery. Of course nothing was found. One day, I walked in, and she was rubbing her incisions with rotten cabbage trying to get it infected. She wasn't seeking pain meds, except to sell. Really, she was just as happy with antibiotics or stool softeners. Anything, as long as they wrote her a prescription, and she got to go to the pharmacy, where she did a whole song and dance for them too, claiming allergies and reactions. She always increased the exaggeration of her story too. One time she fluttered her eyes, after making sure I was looking, and said she lost consciousness in that half a second. She called the doctor, and claimed she lost consciousness for 5 minutes. She called the insurance, and claimed it was 10 minutes. She called the pharmacy, and claimed it was 30 minutes. Then she called 911, and told them she woke up on the floor, after losing consciousness for 4 hours. The worst thing about her was she was a mom. Her son was 28 at the time, and, by all the stories of his childhood illnesses and all her saying how he is severely disabled, I knew she basically ducked up his childhood with Munchausen by proxy. She portrayed him as being severely disabled, and that's why he would never find a wife. I met him. He was healthy, and of average intelligence. He wasn't looking for a wife, he was gay, but she refused to accept that. Working with her was so miserable that I took a couple years off from any and all healthcare after that. We had a patient faking a seizure, so my supervisor told one of us to get the brain needle. The patient made a miraculous and swift recovery without intervention. That's the best part about most of these stories, when they make up some form of fake machine so that the patient stops faking. Cracks me up every time. Fake problems require fake solutions. Young, 18 to 20-year-old woman went running into small rural hospital ER pretending to have abdominal pain. Police officer had tagged her going 40+ kilometers over the limit, which was stunt driving as per the new law in Ontario. Impound and license suspension automatic. Cop followed her into ER and apparently said he'd be waiting for her when she left. Locum staff such as myself were housed at a small bed and breakfast about 15 minutes away, and the ER had pre-printed order sets to be done before we arrived. When I arrived, she flat out admitted that she just came in because she freaked out and didn't stop. I told her we'd give her 45 minutes to call her parents/family before I booted her. except beta human chorionic gonadotropin came back positive, and subsequent ultrasound came back showing extremely early ectopic. Officer figures out something is up when he hears an ambulance call coming over radio. She was completely asymptomatic and just worked out that she dodged both charges and a life-threatening issue by accident. It was definitely a what the duck moment. Pediatric neuropsychologist got a referral for more or less consolidation care. Patient was 13, wheelchair bound, required therapeutic oxygen, seizures, arthritis, musculoskeletal problems, suspected autism, completely nonverbal, severe behavior challenges. The list goes on. He was being followed by at least 8 different specialties, clearly none of whom were communicating with each other, and med list was about 18 prescriptions long, including some incredibly heavy duty stuff, opioids, antipsychotics, anti-epileptics, that sort of stuff. Got kicked to me after his umpteenth ER trip because the ER doc felt something was off and he needed someone to look at the whole picture. Factitious disorder by caregiver or Munchausen by proxy. All of the original symptoms were parent reported, going back to about a year old. It had possibly started with a febrile seizure, fever-induced seizure, in infancy, but this was never witnessed by anyone but mom. It's unclear. She had been telling docs different things. She was convinced her son had all these disorders, told him he was going to die any day. He got a Make-A-Wish trip, donations, etc. He was removed from her custody and taken off most of his meds. Within a few weeks, he was out of the wheelchair playing basketball, no oxygen, super talkative and friendly, no behavior problems. He did have a pretty significant intellectual disability, but there's no way to say if that was organic or the result of the prescription cocktail he had been fed all his life. Hopefully, with some good therapy and a stable home, he can continue to make progress. My brother was an EMT for 2 years, and he told me this. People will try to use the ambulance as a means for transportation from Fulton to Oswego because the hospital is in Oswego by faking seizures. Sometimes, when the head EMT guy was feeling fun and knew that the person was faking, he'd say something like, "Man, it's weird that he's having seizures, but not peeing himself." Apparently, the person would kind of snap out of it for a second, weigh up the repercussions, then either pee themselves or stop faking. I thought that was hilarious. Had a patient when I was an intern feigning blindness. She would constantly be playing on her smartphone, only furiously trying to hide it when someone from the care team came into her room. The best was when my attendant one day strolled past her room and threw his hand up in a highly exaggerated hello wave. She started to throw her arm up too, but caught herself halfway through. Then threw her hand back into her lap and pretended to be staring off into nothing. Nurse for an ophthalmologist here. Had a 21-year-old new patient claiming to be completely blind from a sudden and severe glaucoma diagnosis from a previous unknown doctor. Would feel around while walking, tried to keep eyes rolled back into his head. The whole 9 yards. He said he is a famous YouTube rapper that is now unable to make videos or earn a living. I exclaimed to have heard of him before and very excitedly asked him to search and show me his YouTube channel on my phone so that I could subscribe. He took my phone out of my hand and effortlessly found the YouTube app and typed away in the search bar. Oh, and of course, his eyes were back to normal and focused. I'm amazed he didn't ask for a discount or to have a free checkup for some exposure. Was told this one by a fellow nurse I used to work with when we had a psych floor. It's not unusual for psych patients to stash things in various orifices. This one woman was convinced she was impregnated by a ghost-like figure, but no one would believe her. So one day, she started complaining of massive pelvic and uterine pain. She called them contractions. So the doctor goes to do an exam. The doctor feels something larger in there, so they prep a table to get the object out, which was quite large. So the wonderful third year helping with the procedure starts hearing this woman complain of contractions and yelling things like, "Should I push? I'm gonna start pushing." Doctor trying to work forceps around this woman's parts as to not hurt her. Finally goes, "Got," and as he starts saying it, he pulls out a baby doll, head only. The poor med student did the wobble, went all flush, had problems keeping balance and about took a dive. I was told he didn't live that down the whole rotation. If you like the content and want to support the channel, like and subscribe right now, or you'll be running on fumes. Not a doctor, but am a UK-based midwife. Had a patient who had been in and out of hospital throughout her pregnancy with episodes of heavy bleeding. This was her 6th baby, so she was a fairly well-known patient in our unit. The issue was no one had ever seen her actively bleeding. She'd call saying that she had bled down the toilet but flushed it, and all the examinations we did came back completely normal with mostly no evidence of any bleed whatsoever. On occasions during speculum examinations, we'd see the smallest amount of blood. I was caring for her during a shift where she yet again called to say she was bleeding, walked into her room, and found her jabbing around her coochie with a sharp object to make herself bleed. She had been doing it the entire pregnancy. The reason she gave, because she had 5 noisy children at home, needed some rest, and knew we wouldn't admit her to hospital if it wasn't for a good reason. She would do it anytime her being discharged home was mentioned. We ended up having to complete a perinatal mental health referral and consult with the safeguarding midwives, as she was putting herself and baby at risk of serious harm. Imagine being so exhausted with your family that you feel the need to stab yourself in the coochie. Yikes. I hope that woman found the help she needed. To think people actually have the time and enough motivation to scam doctors, nurses, and trained professionals with silly antics and fake illnesses, especially when there are those who actually have real problems. Mishu from Milan said it best: dishonor on your family, dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on the bell or you'll be running on fumes. See you in the next video.